Hello, I'm Stacy Graff, the Director of Literacy and Social Science for District 47. Thanks for joining me today. We are going to be talking about small group instruction and independent work. We all know what a valuable time of our day that is, and we want to get the most out of those minutes. So, hopefully, today you'll get some ideas of things that you want to work on during the course of this year to really maximize that time. This work today ties to our strategic plan goals, but it also ties to your school improvement plans. Every school has a school improvement plan goal around literacy, and most of those goals are around vocabulary or writing about reading, small group work, independent work. All of those are parts of different plans across the district. So, what we talk about today will tie right in with what you're already working on. The learning intention for today is for you to walk away with an idea of something that you want to invest in and work on this year with your small group instruction or your independent station work. And we're going to visit resources you're familiar with. We're going to maybe talk about some new things that you could try, but really trying to look at this through the lens of what can I do this year to really up my game when it comes to small group and independent work. I love this meme because every teacher has made the teacher face and given that look when they're doing their small group instruction. You've tried all the strategies, you've tried ignoring, you've made sure that they have, really engaging activities, and still you're having to lean over and give the teacher look to students because they're off task during centers. So, we're going to talk about what we need to do to really get to independent station work that's meaningful for kids. I love this definition that comes out of our reading lesson mini book, our reading mini lessons book. Woo! It says the mini lessons in this book will help you establish a classroom environment where students can become confident, self determined, and kind members of the community. They are designed to contribute to an ambiance of peaceful activity and shared responsibility. I so love that definition. And I so realize that that doesn't happen easily. We all have this picture in our mind of what we want it to look like when students are working in their stations. And we really have to work hard to get to that goal. So, right now, I know that you're working hard on setting the tone, making sure kids know the expectations, that you're practicing and rehearsing what that's going to look like, and making that station time a really valuable time in your classroom that kids take ownership of. In your classrooms, I think most of you have the Reading Strategies book. Um, if you haven't seen it, there's a Reading Strategies 2.0 book. And in that book, there's an entire section, I think there's like 28 or 26 lessons about engagement and motivation. And these lessons aren't just about setting expectations, they're about helping students internalize and really take ownership of their learning during independent work time. So, this year, if you don't have this book at your school yet, what I'm going to be doing is scanning and putting notes in the core perspective of lessons that you might want to try to help kids internalize and really be motivated to participate in a productive way during independent stations. So, keep a lookout in the core perspective. Another thing that you can do during independent stations to really engage students is have them start a reader's notebook. Now, if you haven't done this before, what they do in their reader's notebook is they write a letter each week to their teacher about their reading. So they're talking about what they liked about their reading, what they learned from their reading, and there's all kinds of ideas for topics and ways to go about having a reader's notebook. Now, this is in the mini lessons book, starting in second grade all the way through fifth grade, where they have passages and information about how to do this. And I think one of the things that keeps us from having these readers' notebooks where we're in this two-way journal conversation about student reading is that it feels overwhelming. We're like, I don't have time to respond to 24 kids in writing. How am I going to do that every week? One of the things that you want to really be thoughtful about is when you're collecting their notebooks. You don't want to say on Friday, give me 24 notebooks and I'm going to spend my entire weekend responding. That is not productive and it's not good for you. That's not part of the wellness initiative that we're working on in D47. A different way of approaching that might be that maybe one of your stations becomes a place where they write their letter about reading. So on the day they have that station, then they turn their notebook into you. It gives them a piece of accountability, but it also helps you learn about them as readers, and it will help you better select materials that are really appropriately matched to them. So, if you're looking for some information about how you can maybe manage this, you can look in your reading mini lessons book starting in second grade. Another problem that we have sometimes with our independent stations is that we work on things in whole group and then we work on them again in our guided reading, but then the kids go to work independently and they're not applying what they learned. When I started to dig into our mini lessons books, it really talks about the whole group being the setup for kids being able to get to independence. And they have a 3-step process during those whole group lessons. The first step is called Have a Try. The second step talks about summarize and apply. And the third step is share. All of their whole group lessons, whether you're in the book or whether you're clicking on it through our curriculum links, have that same setup. And I know you don't always have time to read the why the lesson's set up that way, so I did that work for you. So the reason it's set up that way is because kids then get multiple exposures, even though it's a very short period of time that you're doing whole group. They can get multiple exposures and have time to really consolidate their learning so that it starts to get embedded in their long-term memory and not just their short-term memory. So the Have a Try is more about your modeling, you're giving an example, they're doing it with you. It's a very supported practice. The Summarize and Apply is talking about, like, what did we do? How did we know how to do that? And then trying to apply it themselves with maybe a partner. And share is being able to share back out, like, what did I learn? How did I learn that? And the biggest enemy we have with this is time. I know that those minutes are so short and you're trying to get so much in, but really be thoughtful about, am I getting to all 3 of those steps? Because if your kids aren't being able to transfer it to their independent work, then we're kind of spinning our wheels. So we need to really make sure to include all 3 of those steps. And again, if you want more information about those, this is straight from the mini lessons books. Also, something for you to consider is this might be a goal for you. If you're thinking about, I really want my kids to get to independence, and so I'm going to stick strongly to this 3-step process in my whole group instruction, this might be a goal that you set after today. So I'm going to have you pause this video for a moment and really talk with a teammate or a colleague about what's working for you with your independent stations and accountability. And when I talk about accountability, if you're spending hours and hours and hours outside of school providing feedback and scoring things, that's not really working for you, right? So we have to have ways to be able to hold kids accountable, but also help them take on the ownership of what's happening. We want them to really internalize and be motivated so that that accountability is internal. So pause this video for just a moment and go ahead and have that discussion. Okay, welcome back. I hope that you and your colleagues were able to have some good conversation about what's working for you in independent stations and what you might want to try to do to really bolster what's happening there. Once we have independent stations really under control and kids are owning their learning and really motivated to do what they need to do, the next step is really honing in on what's happening at that small group table and making sure that we're getting the most out of those minutes at small group instruction because we know how valuable they are. So I'm going to talk about 4 different ways that we can use that time at the table: conferencing, guided reading, book clubs, and strategy groups. All of this, again, straight out of the mini lessons book. Conferencing is a great way for you to get to know students. Now, depending on what time of the year that you're working or watching this video, it may not be right away at the beginning of the year, but you can think about at the start of next year doing conferencing with each of your students right away at the beginning of the year. And this is a one-on-one conference. It gives you time to know your students. The importance of this is going to help you be an informed planner when you're getting to the point of planning independent stations, because you're going to know what motivates your students and what they like. So that's going to help you tie into that when you're choosing their independent work. It also is going to help you learn about how much support they're going to need to be self-managers. Some kids need more support than others. Now, if you're seeing this and it's later in the year, you might have a couple kids that you're really struggling with independent station work. Maybe it's time to do some conferencing with just a couple of kids, just a handful, one-on-one still, but you don't need it for the whole class. You might just need it for a few kids so you can learn a little bit more about how you can best reach them and motivate them during their independent work. We are all super well versed in guided reading, but I want to point out in this definition a phrase that is so important. It says, "This means that the text is more complex than the students can process independently." I know when I was a teacher, I wanted desperately for kids to be so successful. And in reflection, I look back and I think, I really was holding on to students at a level too long. I was keeping them there because it was so rewarding to see them be able to do things independently. But really, at the guided table, we want them in a level of text that keeps them challenged enough that they're not quite to that independent level. And so I was really holding on to my kids for too long. And we do that for a variety of reasons. It might be because you don't have another group that's, close for them to move to. It might be because you just rearranged your groups a week ago. There's 100 different reasons that are logistical that could get in the way of this. But this might be another thing for you to think about for a goal is, do I want to be more aggressive in trying to keep our kids challenged in their guided reading levels so that they're not beyond needing support? If they don't need your support, then they probably need to move up a level. Might be a worthy thing to think about. Another way of us knowing if a student's at the right level is to collect running record data. Now, when I talk about running records, we still have to do the required running records. Those are not going away. We're still doing all of that really important work. But on a day-to-day basis, when you're trying to collect information about your students, you can do what's called an informal running record. And I want to thank Mal Keenan, who follows this literacy blog and shared this with me over the summer. This blog talked about the value and importance of informal running records. Sometimes we get so caught up in needing a proper form or needing to use certain coding that it really stops us from gathering the information we need to inform our instruction. So think about, do I want to start using more informal running records? Using an informal running record can just be on a blank piece of paper and you're noting what students are doing. You may or may not use coding, or you may have your own system that's different from what we use for our formal running records. That's okay, because you're gathering that information for the purpose of informing your instruction and being able to reflect on it and say, what do these students need next? Something you might want to think about for a goal. Another type of group that you can use in addition to conferencing in guided groups are book clubs. And traditionally, people have thought about book clubs being intermediate. But if you look in your reading mini lesson book, it goes all the way down to kindergarten. Book clubs start in kindergarten. A book club is a structure that you can use where you have a small group of students of various reading levels coming together to discuss a text that they've chosen. Now, when I say that they've chosen, I don't mean just open it up to any text, but you might have a choice, a limited choice of 2 or 3 texts, and they choose which one as a group. And the goal is for them to share their thinking and have richer meaning from being in a group talking about a text. This is a great way for us to motivate students to love reading. We know that some of our kids, especially those that are struggling, they're in text that might not be very exciting for them to read. And if that's all they ever get to read, are they really going to learn to love to read? So, using a book club periodically in a text that may or may not be something that they can read independently. You may have to scaffold, you may have to use audio, you might have to do a lot of things to help them access that text. But if it helps them love to read and motivate them to be stronger readers because they love that engagement, this is a really valuable way to group students. It doesn't always just need to be guided reading groups. The last kind of group we're going to talk about today goes back to getting kids to independence. We've all seen those kiddos. They can do it in whole group. They're participating. They've got it. They come to the guided table. They're applying it in their work at the guided table. And then they go to independence and they can't apply the strategy that they've been applying successfully in the other settings. That's when you want to dig into your mini lessons book and look at the strategy lessons. Strategy lessons are designed exactly for that purpose. It's for the kids who have shown us in either guided or whole group that they can perform and do this strategy, but they're not bridging it into their independent work. When you see that, look at the strategy lessons and pull a strategy group. This is going to help reinforce that learning and help those students bridge what they need into their independent work. A final note for today is it's important and crucial for us to build a love of reading in students. If our students aren't excited to dive into text, then we are doing them a disservice. So we need to think about how can we model this? How can we talk about books so that they're excited to dive in and read? And even if it's a read aloud, how are they excited to be able to listen and gain more from that text? If we don't get kids to that love of reading, then we are not being successful. That is something that is so important in our roles. And the biggest enemy of that is time. I know you feel like I have only so many minutes. How in the world can I also say, I want you to love reading? I don't have time to build that. I don't have time to model that. I don't have time for kids to really dive in. And I wish I had a magic wand and could answer that for you. But what I can say is that if we aren't passionate about it and sharing our love for literacy, then the students are never going to get there either. So, as I talk about you thinking about today's intentions of wanting to have an idea of something that you could work on, there's lots of ideas. Maybe it's that love of reading. Maybe it's starting some readers' notebooks where they're writing letters to you weekly. Maybe it's using different kinds of small group instruction. Um, Maybe it's really working on motivating kids to internalize the value of the independent station work. There's a lot of things that you could work on with this that we talked about today. So pause the video for just a moment and talk with your colleagues. What is it that you want to work on with your small groups or independent stations this year? Okay, welcome back. I hope today was practical, number one, and valuable, number two. I want you to feel motivated to take on challenges for yourself and for your students with your small group instruction. I want you to feel like the resources we have are enough and that we've got some great resources that we can dive back into to get some fresh ideas. And I want you to feel like you weren't overwhelmed with 100 new things. That was not my intention. But I do want you to think about how can we really get the most out of our small group and independent work so that our kids grow into flourishing readers who love to read. Have a great day. Thanks for joining me.